Hello, listeners. This is the Risky Planner Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, Albert.
Hey, Nate.
How you doing?
Man, I'm all right. How are you?
I am living the dream.
You know, normally at this point we would say, it's been a while, but it hasn't.
We would say that, and you would say it has been a minute. So
yeah, we would, but it hasn't actually.
It hasn't.
It's not been that long.
So we're not going to do that.
We're back in the saddle after what, like a week?
Yeah, which is important. We have a lot to talk about, and
we do.
We're starting to get feedback from our listeners. My neighbor listens to this podcast, and he gives and he gives me, thumbs up every morning. He's like, "Man, that's awesome."
Great. My dad hasn't given me any pointed feedback in a while. I'm gonna see if I can get him to spill the tea a little bit.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm excited. The topic that we're going to talk about is one that I'm really interested in.
Yeah, the climate.
Yeah, climate change. But in particular, like I was in Thailand, for example, I was in Thailand about a year after the devastating tsunami. So I saw, the effects on like trees and foliage and the beaches. Stuff was being rebuilt.
Was it like a positive experience to see, or did it feel like gloomy and fatalistic, or did it feel more hopeful, like people were really coming together like that? What experience did you have? I'm curious.
That's a good question. I mean, the locals in Thailand, I think, sort of tolerate. I was a backpacker. I was not really a tourist. I was backpacking, right? They kind of tolerate you, so I didn't really get insight into, how the locals felt.
Right. Sure.
Because I guess they're not conveying that to like me, for instance. But, when I talked to like the bartender, there was like the front desk. Yeah, I think people were like cautiously optimistic, right? And there was still a lot of work to do. So I think it was just a pain in the ass, right? To try to bounce back emotionally from something like that, and then physically go out and rebuild stuff. Like that's just exhausting. So
for sure,
cautiously optimistic. And then even before that, when I was growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, we would go and boogie board and like surf at the beaches, Folly beach and stuff when there was like storms. And there was this one tropical storm that we went out on. And then the day after, it was like half the beach was gone, right? Like it was just these storms and the weather, It just changes the landscape.
It does. And like, I think a lot of people, when you mention Thailand, that's the kind of place that most Americans and Canadians imagine when they're imagining a climate impacted zone, like they're thinking about a faraway land that they may one day visit on vacation, or that's home to a mostly anonymous group of people that they will never meaningfully interact with. I'm not saying that's the right way for people to interact with these kinds of disasters, but it does
Disclaimer.
seem to be like total. Yeah. A little virtue signaling.
Yeah.
I'll let you know, I don't feel that way about it myself, but that's the prevailing opinion. That's like the vibe when you have that conversation. Yeah. But, and the reason I bring it up is that I believe that we have a lot of climate impacted zones much, much closer to home, like South Carolina. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I talk to Canadians about South Carolina, I mean, just a little background. I think we mentioned this once every other episode or so. Nate and I are both American Canadians.
That's right, folks.
Dual citizens.
Dual citizens.
That's right. You can hate us for two reasons.
Yes.
But anyway, South Carolina is a lot of beachfront, like a lot.
A lot, yeah. And Charleston is all lowlands, right? It's called the lowlands for a reason.
That's right. So, out closer to the water, you've got places like Wilmington, and I was on vacation in a town that was appropriately called Surf City just last year. And let me tell you, if something really gnarly happens to those places, they're gone.
They are.
They're right on the coast, and that's like Heartland USA.
It truly is. I mean, the hurricanes are becoming more
more severe, more frequent.
Yeah, everything, right? Like, in the flooding is bad. I mean, we've seen just in the last month, like, a crazy amount of disasters in just the North America alone.
Oh yeah,
right?
Like, let's talk about Central Texas. I mean, those floods there, that was insane. The Guadalupe River going over.
So
and just
sad. So sad.
It is. It's terribly tragic, and there's all kinds of things that compound the tragedy and make it feel much more preventable. And whenever something feels like you could have done something about it and you didn't, like, that's the worst, right?
Yeah, I can editorialize, but I mean, it is just a really sad and unfortunate situation.
Totally, and like, but it's going to happen again, right? Like, on that river sometime in the not too distant future. Yeah. I mean, this isn't the first time the Guadalupe River spilled over its banks in a hurry. Like, I'm from Texas. I'm from Southeast Texas, so not really, Central Texas. Guadalupe River is not, close to where I grew up, but I'm from Houston, and we got hit by hurricanes regularly.
Yeah.
Right? You were talking about the rebuild in Thailand and what a huge pain it is, and all the work that has to be done. And there's Houston, Texas is is a pretty wealthy part of the U.S. Like, a lot of oil business there. Most people are middle class. Like, it's a fairly affluent city, and it took a year for Houston to bounce back from Hurricane.
Oh yeah.
God, what's the one that was Hurricane Ike? Like, Hurricane Ike, by the way, ripped the roof off of our office. Like, not Tokanish and Company, the company I worked for at the time, Faithful and Gould. We were co-located with our parent company for months because our office had, like the elevator vestibule or the elevator thingy, like, up at the top of the building, roof completely ripped off. So all those hurricane rainfall, all that hurricane rainfall went right down the elevator shaft for days. So that building was, isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I was going to say, like, a couple of years, like the early 90s, before I was in high school, like, the tornado took the top off my high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unrelated.
By the way, Hurricane Ike, the one, well, I mean, I have a tornado took the roof off my house story too, but I was too young to really remember it. So
yeah, exactly.
I have merely been informed that it happened by my parents, but like that Hurricane Ike, I think, was 2008 when that hit. Wow. So, and that's starting to feel like the distant past now.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think that, it's been, when you reach this age, Albert.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, let's move on. Like, let's dive into the discussion, because you talk about preventable, occurrences of, impacts and the negativity and stuff. So now we'll transition to talk about capital projects, which we usually do. So imagine this, you're 18 months into a $2 billion infrastructure project. Everything's on schedule, on budget. Your Gantt charts are beautiful. Your stakeholders are happy. The client's happy. All of a sudden, a 1,000 or 100-year flood hits, except it's the third one in 5 years, right? Because we're starting to see that more and more. And your site's underwater. And then, not to mention that your supply chain from Southeast Asia has just disappeared. So it's not just a story or, fiction. This is real. This is what's happening to capital projects now.
Yeah, it puts a dollar figure on all this stuff.
Big time. There's a lot to unpack here, and it really boils down to risk.
It does, yeah. I mean, the risk profile for your average capital project, especially if it's being built in a climate zone, which, as we indicated earlier, those are both numerous and getting more numerous by the day. I mean, by the way, I can put a dollar figure on one of those. Like I mentioned, I'm from Southeast Texas. I did a bunch of work in the refineries down in the Baytown / Beaumont / Texas City. That's a very large geographic area I just described, but a bunch of oil refineries right on the coast there. And let me tell you, man, they get flooded regularly, and it gets real hot. Okay. Like, and again, this is project experience going back 15 plus years. And even at the time, we had to shut down our work sites for whole days because of the heat. And when the work sites were open, we had to supply fairly costly infrastructure for people to cool off and get shade and make sure that they were being well hydrated and such, like, because, the concrete jungle effect down there is real. Like, if you're standing on, the foundation for a refinery, it is 10 degrees hotter. And that's in Canadian temperature too, so it's even true. Worse in American temperature.
Yeah, and in American that's about 100 degrees. Yeah, deep in the heart of Texas.
In American, that is, oh my God, it's too hot degrees. And we literally did lose multiple days per month entirely, just gone to productivity loss. And that was then, and it's worse now. I did a little homework on this one, and the International Labor Organization released a report called "Working on a Warmer Planet" that indicates by 2030, projects will have lost $2.4 trillion to productivity lost, and that's just from heat. That's not even talking about the flooding.
We're just talking. Who are we talking about? Productivity? Are these all of the outside workers? Is this everything for the project, or is this?
Well, you want to talk about the outside? I mean, of course, it applies to everything. I mean, for one thing, a lot of the world is not built with air conditioning in mind.
That's right.
There's a lot of places that are passively cooled because the general ambient environment is at a nice, pleasant temperature, or even, like it is here in Canada, it's actively cold a lot of the time, right? But, even here, like I just had an air conditioner installed in my apartment in Calgary, right, this year, because Calgary is reliably nice and cool and dry, but,
yeah, it's
not
usually
anymore.
like negative 40, like you're like 9 months out of the year, no?
Yeah, well, 9 months. I don't know about that, but it's pretty brutal for a solid 3 months. But now we're getting a 3 month window when it's genuinely hot, and like this just illustrates the problem, right?
Right.
Like places that never had to consider heat before are going to have to adapt to it. And even if you've already got an air conditioned supply chain, right? Like your warehouse, your office workers, everybody's got air conditioning coverage except for your outdoor workers.
Yeah.
What happens when those outdoor workers put down their tools for the day? You think everybody else just keeps on trucking? No, right? Like the stuff stops when the work face, is paused. So it's really a huge impact. So if you put your workforce, you send them home for their own safety, then that puts the brakes on everything that your project was doing.
So this is fundamentally changing sort of the approach to project controls.
It should. I don't know that it is yet. I mean,
right.
I was chatting with Dr. David Hewlett at the AACE conference about this project, and actually you can hear some of this in our interview episode, which was the last episode we just released.
Right. Check it out.
Dr. Hewlett figures prominently in there, but one of the things he said is that historically, as a profession, like we don't do a great job of predicting what our projects are going to cost and how long they're going to take. And that's considering the last 100 years of project performance that hasn't included as many climate impacts as we're going to have in the next 5. Right. So whatever risk management paradigm we've had set up for the past 100, it wasn't good enough for that, and it certainly isn't going to be good enough for the world we're about to be moving into. I mean, just to give you another quick statistic here, the IMF recently documented, this was in 2023, a 40% rise in world food commodity pricing, including a 38% single month jump in wheat pricing. That's just in the last few years.
And that was before tariffs, folks.
Yeah, that's pre-tariff. So, this is accounting for all kinds of things. Like, you may remember in 2021, there was a massive flood in Malaysia.
Yeah.
So that disrupted global semiconductor supply chains. Automakers started, having difficulty sourcing those little bitty computer chips that go into absolutely everything. Like a flood in Malaysia 4 years ago is making it more difficult to build an electric car today.
Right. Yeah, so. That's wild. It was who was it that I think it was the new prime minister from Singapore that talked about tariffs not being able to impact an interconnected world. So if these efforts to either bring people to the decision-making table, they're not going to have an effect. Anyways, it's a little tangent, but we can get back.
Yeah, a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, so let me ask you the question that is sort of in my mind is, you mentioned heat-related productivity losses by 2030. How are project managers supposed to start planning for that?
Well, I think there's two ways to answer that question. You can answer it micro, like on any individual project, and you can answer it macro, right?
Okay.
Ideally, those of us in capital project space, we're working to improve the world in some way. We want things to get better. We want to increase productivity. We want to increase, comfort and safety and the livelihoods of people. Like that's the reason why we do capital projects, right? So I'm going to answer the macro question first. I think it's incumbent on us to stop thinking about climate change as a problem that we can solve and start thinking about it as a situation that we need to adapt to. Not because it wouldn't be great if we solved it, of course it would, but the ship has kind of sailed on that. And speaking of ships sailing, we're going to have sea level rise of 2 to 6 feet by 2100. 90% of the world's freight is going to be impacted by that. So, I can't mention ships sailing without talking about that. But anyway, point is that you've got a pretty serious issue on your hands, and we already missed our window for curbing the most dramatic effects of it. So we have to adapt. Like that's where we're at right now. So if you're planning a capital project, there's a fairly good chance in the next few years, because there's like a $90 trillion shortfall of infrastructure development for the next 50 years that we're going to need to make up for just to adapt to our new and changing climate.
Wow.
So there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be, spending some of that money to do a climate adaptation project sometime in the next 5 years. Okay. That's where the money's going. It's to adaptation. So that's the macro answer is like, you better start thinking about what is your next project going to look like? It's probably in that, there's a good chance that it's in that kind of scope realm.
Was
Sorry.
Sorry. You were just going to say macro.
No, interrupt me. Do it.
Micro. I think the idea of climate, impacts as let's say like a line item on your risk register. I don't know if I'm using the terms correctly, but I'm certainly going to try. Maybe you have a fragnet for it.
You probably don't have a fragnet for it, Nate.
No, I'm definitely not using that correctly. But look, so is climate like a line item on a risk, plan, or where does that figure in?
That's a good question, because it kind of depends on where you are. But this gets back to what I was saying initially, climate impacted zone as like type of place that exists. Like there's so many more of those now than there used to be. And, I did work for a few years in Lagos, Nigeria. And Lagos, I don't think they officially get like, quote unquote monsoons, but they basically have the same thing. They have a massive rainy season. The summer is impacted every year. It's really, really difficult to do work because of rain. So you plan around it, right?
Right.
So a risk is something that you don't know for sure is going to happen, right? The inverse of that, something that you do know for sure is going to happen, well, that's called the scope of your project, right? So when you're talking about climate impacts for project planning, right? The rain in Lagos is scope. It's not a risk. You're going to have to plan around it. Okay. So to a certain degree, people need to stop thinking about weather impacts as risks that may impact their project and start thinking about them as scope that they have to incorporate into their project, right? And this brings me back to my point about adaptation. You actually, I think totally without realizing it, segued me beautifully into point 2, the micro. Because
I'm a mind reader.
Yeah, because you are the world's greatest podcast host. So thanks to
and this is my impersonation of Johnny Carson when he was doing that.
What you can't, he's doing the Karnak envelope to the head thing.
Yes.
So if you are a baby boomer or the child of a baby boomer, there is a 50% chance you get that reference. So to the rest of you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is Gen X here talking. Yeah, child of baby.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a borderline millennial, I apologize to the rest of you.
Yeah, but you got it. You knew what I was talking about. So.
I got it because I am, like I said, borderline. Anyway, that's not important right now. What is important is...
Yeah, so scope versus risk.
Yeah.
Are we all becoming weather people?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because one of the things that's taking over project planning right now is hyperlocal weather forecasting. Right?
Oh, okay.
So there is a move towards using private services that use things like drones and local sensors and like privately owned weather measurement infrastructure to deliver hyperlocal weather forecasting on an hourly basis to project sites.
I need to get I hope there's an app for that, because the weather apps that I have just are horrible. So I'm in. Is there an app for that, or can I buy in?
There will be. If there is. You can, if you want to spend a whole ton of money, you can certainly get that done. But In the not too distant future, there may very well be paid weather services that you can get to from your phone. And in fact, I'm saying that as if it doesn't already exist. I bet it does already exist.
It probably does, yeah.
But the point is that project management groups are starting to use those services to avoid weather impacts and plan around them, right? Like they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a plan of cure.
Yeah.
I've said on previous episodes, $1 spent in planning is worth $5 in execution. Like that includes, near-term planning, right? So if you think that you might be in a climate zone where work is going to be impacted by things like heat or flooding or rain or, God only knows what else. Like I've also done some work in the arboreal forests up north in Alberta, and talk about getting cold in Calgary. It gets real cold up there and it stays cold, right?
Yeah.
So, you got to know how many days you're going to lose to that sort of thing. And the best way to know when those days are going to be is with a hyperlocal forecast, right?
So can you give me an example of how that forecast might trigger? Like,
totally.
Yeah.
So, on the one hand, you need to have planned for extra days in your schedule, right? Like, and to answer your earlier question, just really, really briefly about, is this a risk? I answered it in part by saying like, it's scope, right? You have to plan around it. But you don't know when you're going to have to execute that. So that does kind of it kind of puts it into risk space, but I'm thinking of it more as like if you think about your project as one of a certain class of projects, like I'm doing an energy project in Southeast Texas. All right. Your average energy project in Southeast Texas probably experiences some number of days of delay due to rain. Like I'm going to give you a number that means nothing. I'm going to say 20 days a year of weather related delays. Okay. So if you know that you're going to have 20 days a year of weather-related delays, you can't just buffer all your activities to encompass those extra 20 days, because that's going to show your plan, being, ahead, and then suddenly behind, and then ahead, and then suddenly behind. You need to pick milestones in your schedule that you're going to protect with schedule buffer and carve up those weather days as part of your general scheduling contingency to just include, so that this milestone is going to get delivered on this day. The details before that, management doesn't really need to care about. They just need to know that there's contingency in place so that I know when to spend those days, right?
Right.
And here's where the forecast comes in. If I have buffer days in my schedule, I need to know when to use them. And I need to have a high degree of confidence that I'm not wasting them, right? So what if I'm looking at the National Weather Service's forecast and it says, well, Southeast Texas is going to get a big old rainstorm, so send everybody home. And then you do, and then it doesn't happen, right? You've just burned a contingency day and taken on all of the impacts that entails, and you have gained nothing from it.
So that in my mind, I have just a question. Like, okay, so you're describing sort of a best practice.
Right.
Like, what is the biggest mistake that I could make as a PM if I'm trying to plan these contingency? It just sounds so complicated. It sounds like there's a lot of mistakes that could be made.
Oh, well, I mean, those are two different thoughts, right? It doesn't have to be complicated, but there are lots of pitfalls, like lots of ways to make a mistake in this regard. Like one thing is and this probably made it sound more complicated than it is, but I was talking about protecting specific milestones. All right.
Okay.
So my Southeast Texas energy industry projects had a lot to do with like refurbishing existing equipment on site, right?
Yep.
So one of the things we need to know is in-service dates. So every in-service date for a particular piece of equipment is an important milestone. So I have those milestones in my schedule. And the way that I was originally trained to do risk in schedules was to do a risk unimpacted schedule as your baseline and then put all of your contingency days at the end. So if I'm installing 10 new pieces of equipment, I've got 10 intermediate milestones, the last of which represents my final handover milestone, and we would put all the contingency against that. Well, here's the problem with that. That guarantees, or it tries to guarantee, the end date of the overall project. But it doesn't tell you anything at all about when you're likely to actually receive each of those 9 other pieces of equipment that aren't happening all the way at the end. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So the right way to do it is to carve up your contingency so that it's protecting your intermediate milestones, and you know which milestones those are by talking to your project sponsor, by talking to your stakeholders, by interfacing with the operations team, by doing basic project management stuff. But the real trick is knowing how long those contingency durations need to be, right? And weather is particularly tricky because it's seasonal. So when you have a schedule that's being risk impacted, right? The activities that are seasonally sensitive, like the rainy season in Lagos or the winter in the arboreal forest, those places need you to be specific about what work you're planning inside those timeframes.
Right.
So
like it sounds like you need a data set of just weather to draw upon and then to
hence
crunch.
this hyper-local stuff, right?
Does that happen?
It absolutely happens, yeah.
It does. Okay.
And it's happening more because the thing is, all of these things boil down to value proposition. Like if you want to invest in hyper-local weather, it's exactly that. It's an investment, right?
Yep.
And I keep talking about this as if it's the only example of this, but it's just a good, like, instructive example, I think. But in order for that investment to make sense, there has to be a return on that investment. And right now is when we're starting to see. It probably could have been helpful 10 years ago, but thanks to things like the democratization of drone technology, for example, and the fact that you can go buy basically any electronic component on like AliExpress for nothing, right?
Yep.
There's a ridiculous profusion of technology that didn't exist just a few years ago.
Yeah, the AI that to
totally
look for trends. Yep.
AI is doing better at predicting local weather than national weather services in the US in particular, but in the world generally. Like AI is taking local trends and doing better weather forecasting than professional meteorologists now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to
trend prediction, right? Like when it's going to rain, maybe that means the weather report will get better. Not that I really ever listen. That's a bygone era, right? Like when you're like, hey, what are the weathermen say? Like my
traffic and weather on the
parents
nines.
would watch. Yeah, exactly. My parents would listen to the radio or what. Like, yeah, there's still talk radio, but I'm just not. I'm not. It's not my thing. But is there like you've talked about, let's just say, all these risks related to like the whole project and supply chain, but then and for the sake of the discussion, it's like a disaster, right? It's rain or it's flooding but heat, heat, like you said at the top of this episode, can be a hugely detrimental obstacle to sort of the progress of a project.
Yeah, totally.
Because of the impact that it has on the people that are outside actually doing the work.
Well, it's not just that. That's certainly if you are a workface planner of some kind, like if you're a site superintendent or a four person, then you obviously care the most about the health and safety and productivity of your workers, hopefully in that order. So in those situations, like that heat is directly impactful to your team, and so you care about it deeply. But if you're a planner or an engineer or take a step back, a whole organization planning their portfolio of work, you have to think not just about the safety of your workers. You also have to think about materials. Like, what are you actually buying to place in this spot that is hot and getting hotter, right? Is the stuff you're installing going to need to be replaced in 5 years because it broke down because there was too much, going back to my Southeast Texas experience, we had to get, 1,000-hour salt spray coatings on everything. It wasn't 1,000, it was like 4,000 hour. But like those things are crazy expensive because we're right on the coast. And we don't want all of our stuff to rust immediately. So that's one example. And the more hurricanes and that sort of thing you get, like the more seawater starts flowing into your facility, the worse that rusting impact gets. So climate has so we're going to start seeing those specifications change. Materials like concrete that do a very poor job they do an incredible job of storing heat if it's the right kind of concrete. So right now, most concrete that gets poured on project sites is very reflective. It has a super high albedo. It's not particularly porous. It stores a lot of heat, but it also reflects a lot of heat back up, into and it doesn't have to be that way, right? There are other materials that can be selected that do a better job of isolating workers from heat. And it isn't just an issue during the project, right?
Yeah.
People have to walk on that concrete for the next 50 years,
Yeah. What is with all of these upgrades on materials, there comes a price. It gets more expensive.
It does.
Your budgets are going to go up. They're going to go way up. Like, how do you sell that through? Like, let's just say, you're a sponsor and you're of a project, and due to climate risks and material. I mean, are we doubling the project costs? Are we tripling? Like, what are we looking at?
It's hard to know, really, and it's going to depend on the region, like what the specific impacts are. Like, I couldn't say, but it is definitely going to be a hit, right? And some places it'll be worse than others. But what I can say is that even though you're going to spend more money on the capital development of your project, you're likely going to save money in the long run by avoiding the need to do a bunch of upgrades in the future or mitigations, like taking that heat as an example.
Yep.
If I install a bunch of really poorly chosen materials that are going to make the workplace hotter for people and make things degrade faster and that sort of thing, what do you think that does to your operational budget over a 50-year timeline? We've talked about this before, like capital projects run from anywhere under a year to maybe 5 to 10 years. And then those assets are run for the next 20, 50, 100 years.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So the operational cost of an asset dwarfs the capital cost. Okay?
Yep.
So with that in mind, it's really easy to make the case to a project sponsor if you talk about total life cycle costs. So that's, and I've started writing a little bit about this. I shouldn't say too much because I haven't actually written very much of it, but I would love to do some research on this. But in my own personal experience, capital project teams are beholden to people who steward capital project budgets and whose bonuses and performance evaluations hinge on how effective they have been at spending those capital budgets. And the operational budget never enters the picture until you get all the way up the rung to like the executive levels of approval. And even there, they're still mostly looking at those success factors I just mentioned. Like, are you continually going over? Are you delivering on the value? But that value needs to be measured against the total life cycle of the project, or else none of these adaptations are ever going to make sense on paper. You know what I mean?
Like what are you doing now to, what are you investing now to gain later? And that's like a board, that's a board level conversation.
Yeah,
right
but
now.
It shouldn't be.
Not where it should be much lower is what you're saying.
Yeah, it should come right down the ladder. Like the folks I was working with and working for when I was doing that work in Lagos and in Southeast Texas, all they cared about was CapEx, right?
Yeah.
They cared about their capital budgets. They cared about spending them effectively. They cared about getting the most bang for their buck, right? They were constantly looking for cost saving measures, right? So if a climate responsible engineer puts in a bunch of porous roadway surfaces that like trap water and channel it away, put it into cisterns that can be reused in the sprinkler system, like that's obviously a good adaptation for a changing climate that might get torrential rain, right? But it's also going to cost you twice as much per cubic yard as it would to just do the normal stuff.
Sure.
So as soon as that thing shows up on a planner's desk, someone like myself looking for cost-cutting options, I would immediately flag it up.
Throw it out.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, not because I'm a jerk who hates the climate, but because I'm doing my job. Like my job.
I mean, you are a jerk that hates the climate, which you basically walked right into that one. But
every time we get together, I talk to you about how much I hate the climate. That's true.
It does, folks. Albert he's got the climate in his crosshairs. No, just kidding. But seriously though, you're missing like your example, like in that situation, when you cross that, sure, it's double the price, but you're missing this huge opportunity for downriver savings. That was my best attempt at like an Albert metaphor, by the way, which it didn't go very well. But yes,
I think it went fine.
But you're absolutely correct. Is that it is a myopic planning a view, and what we should be advocating for is a holistic sort of, what is put in and then what we get out of it long term, especially mining when you're operating these assets, like you said, 50, 100 years. Yeah.
I mean, again, like there's no comparison between the capital and the operating cost for something like that. And it does mean that projects need to be planned from the top down with those kinds of vision statements in mind, right? So that you can have a whole group buy-in to something like, well, we're not just building a roadway. We're building a sustainable roadway, like one that is meant to be a climate adaptation. It's going to accomplish the goal of cars can go over it, but it's also going to accomplish these other goals. Like that needs to be a top-down decision. Like I said this on another topic recently, that ultimately, it's all about money. Like if no one's going to dedicate the money to actually doing these things, then it's not going to happen. And if your only goal is to cut costs, then it's not going to happen either. And actually, I've spent a lot of time dunking on the California high-speed rail project. That comes up quite a lot on
we talked about that in our last
in the interview episode.
Yeah, exactly. Check out our last episode. Albert went to the AAC conference in California and talked to a bunch of people on the floor. It was great.
Yeah, it was cool. And I asked all of them what they thought of the high-speed rail project, and it was an interesting set of answers. But, a little bit of digging for this episode, we found that one of the reasons why the California high-speed rail project got so expensive is because they incorporate a lot of climate mitigations into the project scope.
Yeah.
Like, for example...
Like what? Yeah.
Well, there's going to be like 552 acres of solar panels built as part of... That's just the Central Valley section, okay, the part that's actually approved for construction. So that's 417 football fields worth of solar panels.
I love you just Americans will find anything to measure anything except for that, like, proper measurement, right? So I mean, we're like
behind
500
units
football
of measure.
fields.
Yeah.
It's gonna be 65,000, cucumbers.
Imagine how many. It's millions of postage stamps.
100%. I love it. But that is a lot of solar panels.
Oh yeah, it's huge. And the idea there is that the rail line should be grid independent if it can be. And that's also an adaptation, right?
Okay.
Like localizing the grid, because what's the first thing that happens when there's a big old windstorm? Power lines go down.
Right, you're done.
Right. So if you localize your grid, you're less dependent on that sort of thing. And by the way, in order for that to be true, like the classic counter argument to solar is, what if it's cloudy or the sun's down? The answer to that question is you need storage, right?
Right.
So there's 124 megawatt hours of battery storage in scope 2.
Okay.
So
wow.
There's going to, and again, like it's an easy project to dunk on because by the numbers, it's a total failure, right?
Right.
Like, at least so far. Like I hope and pray that changes, but for now, we'll see. But the 120-ish miles or so that are currently approved for construction contain all of these things. They're incorporating 300 wildlife crossings. There's going to be over almost 3,000 acres of habitat restoration as part of that.
Okay.
Yeah. So like it's a train project. We're putting a train on rails, putting people in the train to go from A to B. But it's also all of these other things, right? Yeah. So for large publicly funded infrastructure projects, you can expect to see more of that. Another good example, the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway. There's rainwater harvesting systems every 500 meters. Okay. That's approximately every 5.5 football field lengths, by the way, just in case you're wondering.
Wow. Yeah. So, I'm always going to add, I'm always thinking about football
Give it to
fields.
Me in football fields, Albert. Yeah. You got it, Nate.
I don't, no other measurement works for me.
Indeed.
It's like when I'm measuring like smaller things, I'm like, that's a point like 0.075, football field. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm getting quotes from contractors like, I know you've given this to me in actual units, but can you tell it to me in football fields?
I like that. I'm going to do it next time. That sounds like a funny joke.
Speaking of which, I saw another interesting stat that's totally unrelated, but on the subject of building.
We have had tangents, so that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't say. But all the nuclear waste that's ever been generated in the entire history of mankind would fit into a football stadium stacked about 10 meters high. That's all of it. Yeah.
That's it.
That's
wow.
Yeah, but go ahead and be afraid of it for the rest of your life if that's what you want. But, it's actually not that much.
No.
Anyway, moving on.
Interesting.
There's all kinds of examples of this, by the way. Like that whole...
It's always a football field. No, I'm just thinking about a football stadium now.
Full of nuclear waste.
Yeah, basically. Only 10 meters high, though. That's not a lot. That's not huge. I mean, that's 30 feet, right? So
33, maybe? I don't know.
Yes,
anyway.
Because a meter is more than a yard.
A meter is more than a yard. Thank you, metric system. Anyway.
Well, so you were saying, go. You were talking about the line and dunking on it, but...
Oh yeah, and then the Delhi-Mumbai Expressway and its rainwater collection.
Mumbai,
yeah, and then
every 500 meters. Yep.
Another example I pulled up was the Netherlands North Sea Protection Works. Now, you want to talk about designing for a
that
long
is a cool
timeframe?
project.
Isn't that crazy?
That is a cool project.
They're investing somewhere between 1 and 1.5 billion euros annually in this project through 2050. The planning horizon for this project is the year 2200.
Wow.
So
they already have those floodgates, those giant flood. No, not floodgates. The storm, when there's storm surges, they protect from the lagoon from the sea. It's fascinating.
So there's another interesting example of that actually gives a good counterpoint to this whole planning for the future thing and climate adaptation. And that's the same kind of system. For protecting the lagoon exists in Venice, right? Like they just finished a huge.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yes, and that's been going on for a long time.
Going on for so long, in fact, that now that the thing is actually built, they just have to keep it closed all the time because the storm surge and the sea level, it was designed for what it was 30 years ago instead of what it is today, right?
Right.
So now they're dealing with a whole second set of problems because the thing was designed to be opened and closed regularly, and now that it's just closed all the time, they've got like algae buildup and there's not enough like fresh water coming in, so it's just all kinds of problems related to just having had the wrong planning horizon for your project.
Right.
So whoever put the initial design to paper for that thing probably wasn't thinking about sea level rise,
sure,
right, and additional storm surge and like more El Niños or whatever that are making Venice less safe against the water. Anyway,
sell your house to Aquaman.
I hear it's in the market. What are we talking about? Anybody got Namor's number? Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, Albert, let's wrap up here. What's some advice for a project manager that they can start using right now, right away, to help them adjust their planning with climate in mind?
I think that we as planning professionals and project managers need to start like a grassroots effort to try to convince the people who hold the purse strings of projects to actually plan for the long time horizons and think about operational costs and total life cycle costs instead of this hyper focus on CapEx and making all the numbers be smaller. Like we need to get together and insist on this change, or else we're not going to get important work approved that needs to happen. Like another good example we didn't talk too much about is like the nuclear industry is infamous for the electricity being expensive because the projects are expensive. Well, those things are true, but they also generate huge amounts of electricity that will last kind of forever as long as the facilities get maintained.
Yep.
So, I mean, isn't that worth it? Like, shouldn't we be thinking about it from the perspective of like, here's a zero carbon base load energy solution that can solve a huge percentage of our electricity needs. And yeah, it's a little more expensive. But aren't those other things important too? Like, we need to start putting dollar figures on those societal impacts and climate and nature impacts and figuring out how to figure that into our economic modeling in order for those models to net out the way we all know they should, right? To point us in the direction of doing the good, necessary work of adapting to a changing climate and getting really impactful stuff done.
Amen, brother. No, that's true.
Right. Hang on, let me get off my soapbox. Okay.
No, but it's true. Great point. And advice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Albert.
Well, thank you, Nate. It's been a pleasure.
It has. All right. Talk to you later. See you next time, folks.
Hey, everybody. It's Albert here. Thanks for tuning in to the Risky Planner podcast. We hope today's conversation was informative and, above all else, inspires you to excellence in what you do. If you like today's episode, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. I'd also like to thank Thompson Igbo for letting us use his excellent music on our show. If you like what you hear, check him out at igbomusic.com. That's EGBO music.com. Talk at you later.